Well, there's a face that I don't know. I don't think I know Daniel, and I know everybody else's name, if not face.
And I think have you all met Sheila before?
Oh,
Sheila McCutcheon's our new Chief Financial Officer.
I knew you had been appointed, so welcome.
And
Thank you.
Daniel, our planner, and so he's the one that's going to be able to answer all the questions tonight, along with Patrick.
Patrick and I know each other quite well, don't we?
Never seen one another before, eh? Well, I've got all my papers here, but I can't read any of them, of course.
Well, perhaps we'll
So
just
I
leave.
think we're going to approve the agenda, Patrick, Brian.
Yes, I think we better had do. We're adding the one item that we're adding to it, from my point of view, is identification of agenda items for the formal King Edward Bay LAC meeting in January.
So one of you needs to move the agenda as amended.
Jonathan's moving.
I'll second.
1 second. All in favor?
So Steph, you seem to be chairing this, but then I'm quite content for you to proceed that way.
Sorry.
No, that's good. It's good. It's fine.
You go ahead.
All right.
We're
Well,
just making sure you dot the i's and t's, Brian, that's all.
yes, well, good. Thank you for that. I always need that help. So as I'm not away, I'm away from my desk currently. I actually don't have the agenda, and my electronics are playing up. So I have just a small agenda. That's the size of it, as small
Okay.
as one half of that. So I'm struggling to actually see it.
Okay, so we're just gonna adopt the minutes.
But the adoption of the minutes would be for the second, if we must do that now rather than.
Yeah,
Right.
that's next, December 3rd, 2020 minutes.
Yeah.
The recommendation, the motion that somebody needs to move is that the minutes of the King Edward Bay Water System Local Advisory Committee meeting held December 3, 2020 be adopted.
I'll motion what Allison just said.
I'll second that. All in favor? Any dissent? Well, we can carry that. Thank you.
Public comments is next, Brian.
Yep, thank you. Are there any public comments?
Public comments.
And then if hearing none, sorry, did you, Daniel,
public
did you suggest it
comments.
was? No public comments, okay. Well, hearing none, we can proceed to council referral, and that is the rezoning application, which we've all had a chance to look at, and some supplementary information. And I think really the sensible thing to do just be open the floor for discussion about that.
Well,
Is
Daniel,
Daniel, did you want to jump in here and just introduce that motion, and then we'll jump upon you later on.
Sure. I mean, I have a short presentation that's in the agenda, basically, or I've tweaked the council one to give to your committee if you want an overriding sort of presentation at the start, or if you're all familiar with the application, I'm happy to go into questions.
How are people feeling about the application? Are we content with what we've seen so far, or would we like to see a formal presentation right now?
maybe for the benefit of the users of the system that might watch the video, it would be good for Daniel to run through his PowerPoint. Won't take him very long.
Well, if there's a few minutes, please jump in. Thanks, Daniel.
All right, does that show up okay on your screen? Is that the presentation?
Shares. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so we have a rezoning application for Area 1 of CD18, which is the Arbutus Ridge Comprehensive Development Zone. The application was received, it was presented to council, and council referred it to a number of committees, including this committee, before deciding that they want to take further action. So I know that the committee's all familiar, but the CD18 zone is this Arbutus Ridge Comprehensive Development Area. So the new Joan Audrey Lane coming off of Windjammer. And the area in question is Area 1 of CD18. And so Area 1, just to be confusing, is in 3 separate little segments throughout the CD18 zone, and it's where the bulk of the residential development takes place. That's just the ortho photo taken from 2018 showing Joan Audrey Lane going in. So Area 1 of CD18 permits detached dwelling, and it permits uses accessory to principal uses. It permits up to 38 dwellings in the zone, of which 34 are within the King Edward Bay water system. It does not permit accessory residential use, which is how Bowen Island regulates secondary suites, either attached or detached. So the application we received is to permit accessory residential use throughout Area 1, so in those 38 lots, to permit them to have secondary suites, either attached or detached. Area 1 has active subdivisions or has completed subdivisions for the majority of the lots. So 11 have already been created and received additional subdivision applications. And currently, our approved officer estimates that 15 of those lots would be large enough for detached secondary suites.
Daniel, can we ask clarification questions as you go along?
Sure.
So I was under the impression that it was only for detached secondary suites they were looking for, but they want to have attached or detached?
Yeah, the application is for that, yeah, accessory residential use.
Okay,
Accessory
so
residential.
each lot could either could have a suite of some kind then.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So in the staff report that went to council and that you have in your agenda, staff had noted a series of conditions that we would want to see addressed throughout the rezoning application, and crucially for this committee is discussion on water supply. And so looking for the developer to demonstrate there's adequate capacity for water for all the proposed accessory residential uses. And you have as a late item a memo from Kevin Healy, which we can discuss in greater depth. So he's an engineer with Creus, looking to address that issue of the overall water supply. So that's essentially the background information that I have for you, and then I'll stop sharing to open it up for discussion.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Daniel. Any initial comments that people want to make in response to that? Don?
Could I just get clarification, Daniel? We received the report by Creus, I think it is, which was an engineering report in support of the motion. And there, when they talked about the number of lots, they identified 20 lots. You're saying 15, and I thought I saw an earlier version on a staff report that said 11. So I was just wondering what the discrepancies are.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kevin has counted future phases that maybe we haven't received applications for. So when we brought the staff report, our approving officer, I think, added up of the current applications that we have, which ones are large enough. And Kevin's number then probably is more accurate because it's looking at of all the 38.
Well, let's see. As I recall, there were 38, but 4 of them were outside, so we're talking 34. Yeah. And then the number that were submitted were 20, and then 11 were identified. So, but again, the Creus report in section 1 talks about 20. So,
how does 38 get to 20?
Yeah, and why does it go down to 11 and then up to 15? I guess since we're looking at the capacity of the system, it's kind of important to know what we're trying to cover.
Yeah, I mean, I had noticed that different too. And I think because of the 15 that we'd identified, 4 of those would be in the southern property that's outside the border.
Ah.
So like Kevin's counted a higher number than we had estimated, but I think we'd estimated based on applications we have in, and he's looking at probably their plan for the full.
Well, actually, he was really specific. He said there were 20 that qualified in terms of the size of the lot.
Yeah.
'Cause
That'd be
that's
for the
usually limited.
detached, maybe.
Yeah.
He's
Yes.
including
Well,
phase 4.
both of them say detached. So we're talking about detached, because if I understand it correctly, they are entitled to have a secondary suite that is non-detached.
I mean, currently under the zoning, they're not permitted either.
Okay.
And the application would permit, the attached or detached. And so in some cases, the lot is large enough, it would permit detached.
Daniel, I suppose we could kind of cut to the chase here and not worry too much about how we move from one number to another. What is the number?
So there's 38 lots. 4 of them are in the Stewart property. So that's 34. And so there's still subdivisions to come.
There's potential for 34.
There's 20 lots that are big enough to subdivide, or that the zoning, or the bylaw would allow secondary suites. In all
Detached
phases.
secondary suites.
No.
Detached secondary. No, detached, and then the remaining, 14 within the King Edward Bay system would be permitted attached secondary suites.
So there are actually 34, and they could all be to the slightly 678 square feet size.
Yeah, like if accessory residential use was permitted, then all 34 would be permitted a secondary suite.
All right.
And
And
the
then there's
question would
2
just be
kinds.
which of them are large enough to have a detached secondary suite. And to some extent, the number, like they have a number based on projected future subdivisions, but it could change, like they can change phase 4 sizes could change. The lots aren't created, but the crucial number being 34 lots that could add a secondary suite of one form or another.
And I
Don?
had a follow-up question then. Does the motion apply just to area 1, or does it apply to the entire CD1?
Just to area 1.
Okay, so we could get another application for detached suites on the remaining areas.
I mean, the remaining area is the area 2, which allows the cottage residential development.
Is that counted in the 38?
No,
Okay, so area 1 total development number of lots could be 38,
yeah,
less the 4 that are in the Stewart package, so 34.
yeah.
And of those 38, 20 of them are big enough to have a detached secondary suite.
Yes, I think that's what we are saying, Alison. But
Yeah.
I don't think the distinction between attached and detached is all that great. It's the same size that people are allowed to build. Right?
Well, except that the floor area of the house, Brian, if it has an attached secondary suite, can't be any bigger. So, whereas with a detached, the main house could be the same size and then add a detached.
If your acreage is large enough, yes, that's.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
But just a couple of issues for clarification then. We've talked about the Stewart house, 4 houses not being part of this calculation. But I remember that the original planning application and consideration for this assumed that the wells associated with that land were within the King Edward Bay system. That's no longer true, and that's something that's only just come to light.
Yeah, the water supply assessment assumed those would be included, but they've been
Excluded now.
pursuing their own supply for some time.
So the assumptions that were made in the agreement to this subdivision no longer actually apply. And there's a risk now, or potential risk, for 34 additional suites, albeit small suites, but nevertheless suites, are possible. That's what we're saying. That's the issue that's being put to council. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we know what we're dealing with now. So there are issues then about what concerns might there be about that change in assumptions, and I'm interested in Dawn's point also about the implications for subsequent applications. So this is 34 now, but should another application be made for another area, we could have a further group. Now, I've kind of assumed, and just help me if the technical people can help me, that the cottage development, which is really important for King Edward Bay, I think very important for the island, has always assumed a certain number of people in that population. In fact, that land has been put aside. It can't be done for anything else. But that is not currently in our water calculations.
It is in the, you were all involved with the concept design report looking at the west side water systems and aquifer assessment and the well capacity assessment. All of that work accounted for the all of the projected development that we were envisioning, including the cottage residential.
Well, that's helpful. Thank you for that. Any other comments? Dawn?
Brian, you asked about concerns. So my primary concern is the resilience of the system itself. And I have two issues on those concerns, although I don't think they impact the worth of this motion. But I'd like to see some comment on it. The first concern I have is the integrity of the water supply. And I'm thinking now in terms of a large perspective here. Looking at the urban systems report, it looked like if you took the projected demand and it added that to the reserve we need for Fireflow, that the projected demand was about equal to our current capacity for reserve. In other words, we're getting pretty close to the limit. So I just would like to see some assurance that what we're looking at now was accommodated in those projections. Patrick, can you maybe speak to that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Maybe you could-
Okay. In the urban systems report, the question of future demand was addressed with respect to secondary suites. And a projection was made in terms of the average daily demand, and from there extrapolating into what that would be like once the entire system was built out. And then at the same time, there was Fireflow requirements. And those fed into what size of a storage tank we should have.
Yeah, those were separate calculations. So the calculations of Fireflow requirements, they included a 25% of the maximum day as part of the fire storage, but the demand projections were based on the average day demand, and so there's the current average day demand for the current number of connections, and then there was the projection of the future average day demand, which increased the assumptions about what the water use would be per connection. So part of the reason that was increased is for factors like climate change, and the main factors were climate change and the potential for properties to have secondary suites. So essentially we assume that we have an average of 2.5 people per unit per connection currently, and in the future that we raised the assumption to 3 to account for those factors. And in terms of the supply with the additional well, the the demand and supply balance for King Edward Bay is strongly positive, so that there isn't there's an ability for the King Edward Bay wells and reservoirs to accommodate a fair bit more properties than are currently in the system, and assuming full build out with full secondary suites of Arbutus Ridge.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was my impression too. It looked like a pretty rosy scenario. But when you factor in the question of a fire reserve, and I'm thinking now the problem that Tunstall Bay is facing, when they're looking at a larger tank capacity to accommodate a reserve. It struck me that our projections, although this water supply looked like it was going to be adequate, there would come a time at which, because the fire reserve has to be predicated upon the average daily demand, that if there was a large demand, we would eventually exceed what we need for the fire underwriters survey. Is that a threat?
I don't see that being an issue. I mean, the reservoir storage volume that you have is 591 cubic meters. And Fireflow, the bulk of the Fireflow calculation is the FUS Fireflow. So 76 liters per second for 1.6 hours, right? That gives you.
How many cubic meters is that?
It's about 450, I think, and then you're adding. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but then you're adding 25% of the maximum day demand as balancing storage. And then in this case, it's also adding 25% emergency storage. On
Right.
top of that. So,
and when you do that, then we get kind of close to our current tank capacity.
right. Yeah. But the maximum day demand is, that's based on 2.5 of your average day demand for the future scenario where everything's built out. So essentially it's saying your tank is the size it should be for Fireflow plus balancing storage.
Right. But it looked to me like we're getting close. So I just would like to make sure that the projections here have encompassed the scenario we have in front of us. That is a portion of the development which has detached secondary suites. And in your opinion, that still is the case?
That was the assumption that was made in the concept design study that looked at future demands and Fireflow requirements. So that assumption was built into the concept design.
That Arbutus Ridge would have detached secondary suites.
Yeah. So essentially, it assumes you've got 29 connections now, and the number of future connections, potential future connections was 42. And as I was saying, the flow per connection assumption was increased.
Right.
The future demand estimates.
So what I have, just for reference, that's table 1 of the urban systems report, right?
Yeah.
And looking at our row, the existing reservoir has 591 cubic meters, and the projections with the emergency buffer is 580.
Right.
Okay. Well, as long as this doesn't skew those results outside that limit, I'm kind of comfortable with that. But could I ask you, what's the current status of the application for the Arbutus well? My understanding is that it takes a long time. Is it under review still, or do you have any?
Well, the Arbutus well is in service, and it's been in service since about August.
At the one way up the hill with the tank way up the hill?
It's the one near the reservoir tank. It's got a treatment building, so it's a good well. It's productive and it recovers quickly.
In the urban systems report, there was reference that the developer was going to put in a second tank. Is that still the plan?
I believe so. So currently they've got a booster pump that supplies the upper properties. And when part of the plan for phase 4 is a second reservoir up higher, and then the booster pump will be decommissioned at that point, and the upper property served by gravity from the upper tank.
Yes, because I think there are some lots that are higher than the current tank, or some
Yeah.
potential lots.
I have a second issue, but I'll postpone that and defer to other people who might have questions about the water
Oh.
supply.
No, Don, you're asking all the questions I would ask, and more.
I have one question.
Okay.
Bruce?
In regards to the chlorination process, the design of the current system, was it designed to deal with the additional homes yeah, is it designed for the additional homes? Or is it designed for the current application? In other words, King River Bay and because chlorine is based on contact time. So when I go through a treatment process, I have to design my chlorine contact time to the maximum daily usage of the development. So do we need to look at increasing the system for King River Bay?
Interesting.
Well, the treatment building, the new well was essentially, and treatment building was built for Arbutus Ridge.
Yes.
And it includes chlorination, UV, and filtration, and all of those
Right.
processes were designed for the ultimate build out. Well, the ultimate build out plus Stewart properties, which were intended to be included at the time. The assumptions that they made, they're essentially assuming, the bylaw number of 1,100 liters per day per connection. And currently it's about 450, and the future projections are that it would be about 600. So the treatment process is
So we won't see any capital costs associated with these new additions of homes. Okay.
Helpful. Any further comments about the kind of internal matters, the technical matters associated with this development? Don?
Brian, could I move on to a second issue, which again concerns the integrity and security of the system? And that's not the technical water delivery part of it, but rather the financial part. Because as we move now to the development of Arbutus Ridge, and especially if we look at detached suites, we're getting up to a larger system. And I'm quite concerned from the warnings we've been given for over several years by the former chief financial officer that we need an adequate reserve. And last year, as noted in the minutes that we just approved, we had asked that a statutory reserve be set up, and that the capital reserve that we've been accumulating, capital surplus, be transferred into that. And we haven't received word that that's been done. And my concern is that we're expanding the system now without what I think are the financial infrastructure that's necessary to support such a larger system.
Thanks for raising.
To whom I should address that, but it's a concern that I just would like noted.
It's very helpful that you raised that, Don, and I've got a related point to that issue also. And it's unfair, Sheila, to drop you in it, having just kind of arrived and not knowing this. But for some years, just to fill you in briefly, King Edward Bay LAC has been asking to have a statutory reserve identified and confirmed that it has actually been identified. For some anxiety exists in the community that capital reserve is being used or siphoned off, being used for other things. Certainly we don't have real control over it. So that's one of the issues that we would very much like to have resolved finally in the meeting in January. But secondarily, if I can build on your point, Dawn, there remains a rather confused issue about how we fill that capital reserve. And and this brings us on to the issue of blue water and the use of King Edward Bay infrastructure and water that is drawn through that infrastructure taken to blue water, and how blue water recompenses the King Edward Bay LAC for the water that has been used. That still has not been resolved. We thought it had been resolved, but then your predecessor unilaterally changed it in such a way that had no discussion. And as a consequence, we still don't know what the algorithm is, as it were. It's been stated in ambiguous language elsewhere. We'd like to just resolve that finally, to take into account both current use and dealing with capital replenishment. So those two elements of it seem to have got constantly confused. So that was, let me leave that with you, Sheila, in anticipation of that. Michael, you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, actually, the previous speakers have covered most of what I had in mind anyway, so that's great.
Any other
I could
matters?
just maybe if I could just respond. There has been no progress made yet related to the setting up of a statutory reserve. However, there are reserve funds and some surplus at the end of 2020. And there is, like for instance, last year in 2020, there was about a $14,000 entry in relationship to the purchase of water between Blue Water and King Edward Bay. So that's usually a year-end entry. There will be a formula that adjustment will be made in 2021 also.
Sheila, if I could too, I think one of the issues related to that is what the surplus funds were like, because our intention was to transfer those into a capital reserve fund. Right now, they're just floating around, and we don't even get a proper accounting of them. We just get a footnote to the budget saying that the estimated funds, for example, the last report last year at the meeting was the estimated accumulated reserve was 66,500. And we'd like to just nail that down and have it properly accounted.
Yeah, and that's pretty accurate, the figure there.
Okay, good, that's helpful. Again, the reason I raise this, it's more to do with the operation of the water system, but because we are looking at a number of new connections, and I just wanted to make sure that we have in place the proper way to handle them.
Right.
Could I ask one other question related to this? At what point do the different lots that have now been subdivided become part of the water system, and when do they start paying non-connection fees?
That's a question for Annette or Patrick.
They have already been added to the system. They've been paying as of the last invoice. It's now 55 lots, of which 12 are unconnected.
Well, it's very helpful, Annette. Thank you for that. And Angela, for clarifying our situation. We hope to resolve that as quickly as we can. The supplementary matter to that is the resolution of what should be in that reserve. And we've not done a resolution of that yet. So it would be helpful to know how we're going to resolve matters that have been left undealt with for some time.
Right.
So I'd like to raise one more issue, a kind of external issue. I know we've had an interesting discussion about the internal and some technical matters related to this proposal, but there is an elephant in the room that we haven't addressed, and that is that however much water we may think we have for King Edward Bay and the LAC as a whole, there is the problem of blue water being in in difficulties and almost entirely dependent on water from King Edward Bay. We were within literally 20 hours of signing an MOU, which would have put all this to bed, really, and we would have been able to just move on. But unfortunately, Blue Water found themselves unable to proceed with that signing of that MOU, which raises anxieties for in Bowen Bay and for King Edward Bay. Those anxieties are that we're not quite sure yet about the water that's being transferred to Blue Water. We know that millions of gallons, literally millions of gallons over more than 10 years, were lost down Spyglass Ravine into the ocean for a leak that everyone knew existed for 10 years as a result of no investment having gone into that place in Blue Water. There are other leaks because it's a very old system. We still do not know how much of the water that's being taken from King Edward Bay, from the infrastructure that's been created there, transferred to Blue Water, but not necessarily ever reaching a household and being leaked out into the ocean somewhere. We still have no estimate of that. Now, is it sensible to be thinking about extending the amount of water demand that there is in Arbutus Ridge at a time when we have an unknown amount of water being siphoned off into Blue Water, who are completely dependent upon King Edward Bay, that we have not yet accounted for? It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know where the logic is in that.
We do have metered account of water transferred to Blue Water.
Well, that's very helpful. But do we have it rationalized against the amount being used by the connections there, the residents there? So we know how much, you might have some idea of the water, how much water is leaving King Edward Bay, but do we have an accurate picture of how much is being used by the residents of Blue Water? And how do we deal with the difference, which is a subject we have never really resolved? Who pays for that? At the moment, all the capital infrastructure payments associated with that come entirely to King Edward Bay.
Capital associated with what? Sorry,
the money, the capital associated with the water that has been created by the infrastructure in King Edward Bay, but never sees a house.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a plan for upgrading the Blue Water infrastructure. I mean, it's going to cost millions of dollars. We have a plan for closing the supply gap, which, as you know, requires cooperation of Bowen Bay and King Edward Bay water systems, and I'm hopeful we can get there sooner than later. You know, it is true that this Arbutus Ridge well coming online has bought us a little bit of time to get that solution implemented for Blue Water. You know, we do our best to find leaks in the system, you know, where we do see consumption that's above normal, or we see evidence of, you know, water coming out of the ground when it should be dry, those types of things. All of the water going to Blue Water is paid at, you know, the rates that are established, that are agreed to. I mean, that's part of the reason why Blue Water has no reserves is because they're buying all their water, not all of it, but a lot of it. So it obviously has to be addressed, and we have a way to address it. And yeah, I share your frustration that, you know, there's a plan here. We just need to figure out the financing and, you know, the cooperation element, and can move forward with it. But we seem to be stumbling with you know, the MOU. So.
And can I say, just for the benefit of others from King Edward Bay, that you and Liam have been fantastic in that whole process of discussing this, and really grateful to you guys for being so transparent and helpful. But we're left with a conundrum. That is, we have an unresolved problem of a large population, 140 odd connections, who are reliant on King Edward Bay for water, and we're thinking of extending this, the risks to this water system with this proposal. I think you know, if Blue Water was entirely resolved in its difficulties, it had its own supply, it found some more water, or even at the very least, we could be assured of its infrastructure being sound. I'm not sure what kind of leg we'd have to stand on if we wanted to oppose this. But I just don't see the logic of pursuing it until we have resolved it.
I'd just add to that, Brian, that I worry with every little bit of new infrastructure that comes online, like the new Arbutus Ridge well, it just allows Blue Water to continue to kick the can down the road, so to speak, and not make the decisions that need to be made there.
Interesting point.
Can I ask a clarifying question about the water study? The water study was done on the basis of household consumption, right? And so assuming there's enough water for all of the King Edward Bay and the expansion, how much did the west side water systems, how much extra water is there to go to King Edward, to Blue Water, assuming everything, there weren't any leaks, it was just normal consumption? I mean, is there enough with all these extra? But I think Brian's concern is, what if there's some more major leaks and stuff? Are we going to find ourselves not having enough water for what we've got plus the new guys?
Well, and there is enough water for everybody. It's just not all in the place where it needs to be. We need to get water from the Bowen Bay wells into the Blue Water system. And there's a way to do that. It's not that hard to do. It just requires some capital and some borrowing and some cooperation. So it's a priority.
Don?
Maybe to provide one possible answer towards that, it's in Table 2 of the Urban Systems Report, which provides in the final column the well surplus or deficit for each of the systems. And what it shows is that in the future, assuming everything is built out, and I assume it encompasses the issue here of detached suites, again, assuming everything is built out, well, King Edward Bay will have a well surplus of 34 cubic meters per day. And to put that in perspective, then, if the same projection table lists the Blue Water Park as a deficit of 240 cubic meters a day. So in other words, once we are fully set up, we'll still have a bit of a surplus, not much of a cushion, but we will, but it will not by itself be able to support Blue Water.
And Bowen Bay is in there as well with a surplus.
Correct.
So you have to add the two together. Yeah.
We need Bowen Bay supply as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's one possible answer then, which is that we will be given help from Bowen Bay to support.
Well, that was the whole idea, is that the most productive wells, other than are in Bowen Bay, other than Arbutus Ridge, that's very productive as well. But the trick is getting. If we could get water from the Bowen Bay wells into the King Edward Bay reservoir, there would be enough water for everybody. And that's, it's costs some money. It's not unmanageable. There's a bunch more work that needs to be done. Obviously, Blue Water needs their own reservoir. All of their mains need to be replaced. So it's probably $3 to $4 million of work, probably more like 4. So it's a long-term plan, but the immediate supply piece is it is doable in the near term.
I'm with you, Patrick, on this. I mean, we've had long talks about this, and we tried to be on board with it, but Blue Water has still not signed an MOU. They have still shown no interest in proceeding. We're too late to do anything in time for the next summer. If there's a drought, for example, next summer, how long is this going to continue? And my sense is that we should think about a conditional approval that is conditional on those matters in Blue Water being addressed. And until they're addressed, I just don't see the sense of a proposal like this. I don't see that it makes sense to proceed. I know it's problematic. I don't want to be difficult with it, but there it is. That would be my suggestion to this group.
I also have to note that this has not been, this rezoning application has not been referred to the Bowen Bay LAC, and it does seem that it might impact them as well.
I agree. Any further comment on those matters? Anyone? The LAC has made its voice clear on this. I wonder if people outside the LAC have got comments. Now, I'm looking at you, Daniel, really, because you're
yeah. No, I mean, I think I appreciate the feedback and discussion from the LAC and your perspective on the water system.
Yeah. You probably worked out that we're reasonably well informed on these matters. So, any other matters that we? Well, I
just wanted to
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, just I mean, I appreciate the concerns that you have, and they're, of course, they're very real. In terms of just order of magnitude, in the future build out scenario, the based on the assumptions in the the urban system study and concept report, we're looking at maybe 3.4 cubic meters per day additional demand as a result of secondary suites in these 34 units. So it's not a big number. It is more. It's not big numbers more. It's not like a whole other development area, but it is more. Small amount.
We have a couple of options here. Well, three, I guess. One is to approve the subdivision. The other is to not support it. And the third is to support it, but provide commentary. And I don't know what the feeling of the other members of the LAC is. I will disclose, I was on the Advisory Planning Commission yesterday, also dealing with this rezoning application, and I did vote in favor of it, understanding that the questions related to water supply would be reserved to this committee. So by way of disclosure, I don't know what do you the other members of the LAC feel?
And just
commentary, there's two kinds of commentary. It could be a paragraph in which we express our concerns, or we could offer approval conditional upon.
Okay.
And I think just to add or help your sort of decision making, is that this referral tonight, if this application proceeds, wouldn't be your final referral. So council referred it initially to a number of committees and then to come back to council to report on the results of those committees, to then direct staff to prepare a bylaw. And then generally then that bylaw is then referred to the same committees again to comment on the bylaw and any new information.
Okay.
So if it proceeds, don't view this as your only opportunity to provide comment and to review the rezoning application.
And what do you think the timing on that would be, Daniel?
I mean, not till the new year
Would there be sufficient time for us to determine whether or not the rectification of Blue Water was proceeding in an appropriate way?
That's going to That's going to be a 5-year plan
Okay.
at best to essentially completely replace the Blue Water Park system.
Daniel, Patrick, I think that there's lots of compromise there, though. I mean, of course, we would all like to see it all magically done and completed so that we could then make a decision about it. It's not going to happen. We understand if there was a real commitment, if there was shovels in the ground and pipes going in the earth, if there was a commitment for the spend and arrangements for the finance all in place, then there's a couple of years of discomfort while we have.
Or even Blue Water signing the MOU.
Well, there you are. I mean, there's unless they are take that kind of step, that real step, then I'm hesitant. And I would recommend to this group that we do not support this proposal. But subject to real progress being made with Blue Water, real commitment to spend that money and to make those changes, well, that's different. Then we can be reasonable over a couple of years of disruption.
So, I mean, it is to fully address Blue Water's issues is a 5+ year plan. I mean, it is feasible that the supply gap piece of it could be addressed much sooner, you know, even next year. So it's, I guess there's a lot of difference depending on what we're talking about in terms of making progress. It is addressing the supply gap issue and having sort of a 5+ year plan for renewal. You know, would that be considered progress? Enough progress to.
I think signs of forward movement from Blue Water of any sort, be it glacial or otherwise, would be appreciated.
Yes. Well, again, I keep tripping up over the fact that the MOU is not signed by Blue Water. That tells me that whatever plan you might have in place, Patrick, you're not going to get the support of the Blue Water LAC.
I would agree with that as well.
Go on, Bruce, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, if they don't agree with the MOU, then really what they're asking is for Bowen Bay and King Bay to flip the cost to cover them. That's my interpretation. That may be wrong, but without the group from Blue Water showing an intent to collaborate on expenses, it's very difficult for me to support the program.
It didn't really have to do with, I mean, I think it's my take on, they're on board with, you know, the approach and understand that they have to pay. You know, it got tripped up in terms of really preamble stuff like language and description of the background and the history, which I understand from your perspective needs to be acknowledged and needs to be there. You know, and, you know, sometimes when you get into the history of things, it, you know, doesn't reflect well on everybody. And,
no, it doesn't.
So there was, you know, and that's really all it is. And I think we can get past that. I don't, it's not really that material to what's needed in the solution itself. You know, if they're not saying, oh, you guys have to pay for everything, and, you know, they recognize they have to pay. It's just,
then why don't then have them sign the MOU?
yeah.
Really, I get it's hard, easier said than done, but they have to rise to it. They got to find a way. They're a community. If there's some people in there that are struggling with the concept, whatever the background is, they still got to find a way to deal with it. They have to.
And you know, they don't. Sorry to interrupt you, Bruce.
Sorry.
I was just going to suggest that they don't have to sign the MOU, actually. Well, they could. I'd like to see them do that. It would be perfect, great if they did. But actually, they could make progress in other ways. They could, with the municipality, come to a renewal agreement and sign it off about what they're going to spend and how they're going to spend it. But they haven't done that either.
That's what we'll be discussing with them at the next meeting is the capital program that's needed, the price tags, the financing options. That's the main focus.
If they come back with if you're able to get them to sign up to something and that commits them to, then I think we can support this kind of proposal. If they decide that they're going to sign the MOU, agree with Bowen Bay and King Edward Bay about the history, we did have that history in there to make sure that it never trips us up again. And then I think that's another way we can make forward. So I'm just kind of waiting for Blue Water to do anything.
Brian, can I just ask a question? Hang on here. Oh, what did I do? I just lost you all. Can I just ask a question about table 2? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
I don't actually have table 2 in my.
Well, it's the one Dawn referred to, and it's the very last column. And so the column's headed well surplus / deficit minus existing / future maximum day demand. So there's 2 numbers in the last column. So for King Edward Bay, there's 108, and then there's 34. So is the 108 the well surplus? But when you take away the maximum day demand, then it goes down to 34?
Allison, my interpretation of that, and it took me a while to puzzle this out, but I think the first figure before the slash is the existing, and the figure after the slash is the future.
Okay, so then if you go down to the totals at the bottom,
Yep.
when all
I'm
3
with
are
you.
added up, you've got a 77 deficit.
I was going to point that out. Yep. Even if we brought Bowen Bay in with us, and
This is misleading the way they've presented this. If you're looking at well and aquifer supply and water balance, balancing that with demand, you're looking at average day demands. And I'd have to go back and remind myself why they've applied this maximum day demand, which is typically 2.5 times average day demand. You can have it. I'm not entirely sure what that column means.
Well, if I could step in, the maximum daily demand is part of the calculation, and back to my original question about infrastructure for filtration and chlorination. So MDD is a critical part of that peak flow. Does your chlorine inject at a rate and contact time to meet those kind of demands? So they're kind of not directly related to what your well is, although it does relate to it. But yes, it's interesting to see where the gaps are. So I'm just wondering whether the whole infrastructure is able to commit and support all these 3 communities. I have to look at, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Dawn, yeah, I'm with you.
I think we're at the point of asking unanswerable questions, right? Technically speaking. And so to get back to the proposal, I think we've had a really healthy discussion about the technical matters and some financial matters and some external systemic matters about the whole of the West Side. The question remains, though, for the sake of the municipality, who could just ignore our advice. In fact, there's no requirement that they take our advice at all. But should they choose to be influenced by us, what are we going to advise them? And we could simply offer approval. We could offer approval or with a commentary, conditional approval, or we could simply reject it.
I would support a conditional approval, Brian.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would as well, although I think we might have some difficulty drafting the condition, but maybe we should give it a shot.
Yeah, I agree.
So is the condition the MOU? Is that the level of
Good start.
specificity you're at?
Some progress.
Okay, so I've got something, if that's
I should have known you
Or-
would.
Sorry, Patrick, do you mean some progress on the MOU or some progress?
Well, I think that was I think some progress, and it was left a little bit open-ended what exactly that means. So that's why it's a little bit hard to
Well,
put as a
Okay, I
condition.
could,
let's have a go, Steph. See what you've
okay, I'll
got.
share the screen and we can get rid of that specificity, particularly because that's actually an offline discussion. Let's see. You guys can boss me around. Can you see that?
Can you make it bigger?
For the iPad in the dark. So
Oh, I can see it, but Brian's got it on his phone, so it's going to be even harder.
I've got this one for it.
Okay.
so instead of the MOU, say something about whereas BIM staff and West Side Water System chairs. Is that a good place to start? I've been working towards developing an understanding and moving forward. Am I making things up?
No, it's good. Carry on.
For the 3 systems. And whereas no agreement has not been reached.
I think what you had before was pretty good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Last, okay, sorry. Control Z. This one or all the way before?
It's me then.
All the way back?
No.
All the
you're
way
sure-
back.
Let's keep Zetting it. This?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I would add to whereas this MOU has not been signed, nor I think we need to say something about progress. We won't be able to define it because we have no particular benchmarks or anything like that. But I think we do need to say, just put the concept that then, yeah, that's good, nor has other progress been achieved. And we have to say,
Regarding what progress regarding collaboration or?
Well, I think, isn't Michael suggesting that NORAS goes after the MOU, second clause?
right, yeah, because the signing the MOU, I would say is progress.
Yeah.
And then we could say this LAC is reluctant to add further users.
That.
Another
Okay,
whereas.
so-
Yeah.
Okay.
Until progress.
A system with an
To that
uncertain
system.
future.
Until progress has been demonstrated.
Yeah.
Okay. And
And
council.
then you need to change your resolution. Just to say, therefore, be it resolved that the King Edward Bay water system cannot support the rezoning application.
Yeah.
Well, will not.
No, cannot. It's
Cannot.
different from will not. Will not
And
means
it
you're,
cannot, and I might even say cannot at this time. I mean, I don't.
yeah.
Well, it says until agreement has been reached.
I don't think you need that anymore.
No, you've got all the whereases now.
Yeah, just say cannot at this time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh well.
Yeah.
We're whether the council accepts our recommendation or not, we're at least communicating our concern.
I'll motion to support this motion.
I move.
This is hilarious stuff because we joked yesterday about how I would vote in favor of it on one committee and
I know, it's okay. You're very
I
clear.
I
It's
really
okay.
didn't think that that would happen, but I think it is
You're
logical.
wearing different hats, Michael.
Exactly.
You're a true solicitor, so we know that.
Good thing I'm not on the third committee dealing with this.
Your brain would explode.
You'd abstain then, I'm sure.
I mean, as a plan, I will say, and I feel sorry for the developer on this, as a planning concept, secondary suites are a great idea, just as a pure planning concept. But yeah, we have an issue with water.
Okay, it's been moved.
Somebody has a second.
Second.
Brian, you're
You're
on mute.
muted, Brian.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Mhm.
So we have a proposal and we have a proposer and a seconder. All in favor? Hands up so I can see them. Thank you. And against? Any dissenters? Well, we can approve that. Thank you very much. I think that's the end of our meeting, isn't it?
Well, do we want to talk about,
Nope,
We got one
you
more.
added stuff.
you
Sorry.
added it to the agenda, Brian.
Yeah.
That will teach me. All right, so just a few moments, just fleshing out what is going to be on the agenda, which we've already mentioned, actually, a couple of things. Any items for the agenda in January?
I've already mentioned one, which is I would like to, and Sheila, you mentioned you will have exact figures on the accumulated reserves. If we could get that information, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I can provide that. No
Great.
problem. I could probably provide that in advance also.
Okay.
I think
good.
you want to say accumulated reserves and surplus.
Yes. Well, I don't think we have a reserve though, technically, do we?
Well, we often had a notional reserve fund, which was called reserve, and then accumulated surplus as well.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
they're
that's
both
correct, Allison.
surplus. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
correct. There is a notional reserve.
Yeah. Well, the more granularity, the better. So that's
Yeah.
great. Could I add another one too? But it's perhaps more for Patrick. When I was going through the urban systems report, there is the EXP study that was part of it, and it made reference there to some concerns about saltwater intrusion into well 497. And since the recommendation of the urban systems report was to make 497 our primary well, they had some specific recommendations about how to cycle it and how to test for intrusion. So I just was wondering if we could get an updated report on that, because we're talking about threats to the system, and if 497 goes, we'd be in real trouble. So again, I'd just like to make sure that that particular thing, because it's buried way down there in the report, just doesn't get left off our radar screen.
Thanks for that. Thank you, Don. Jonathan, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if it's possible and if it can be done in time to get a bit of a technical report on how the wells and systems performed over this drought summer we just had in time for the meeting in January, just so we can get an understanding of how stressed things got.
Okay, can we add that to the minutes, please, Steph? And then the issue that I wanted to resolve is a review of the algorithm for repayments or recharging Blue Water for our provision of water and capital replenishment. Anything else for that meeting? Good. Well, it looks like we've done, and we're only a little bit over.
And I'm still in the
Thanks very
dark.
much to and your analysis.
Yeah, I hope you get your
Thanks,
power.
Allison, for hope the power comes on soon.
Well,
we'll see what-
everything I've got planned for dinner can be cooked on the gas stove cooktop, so we're good.
Mhm.
Okay,
All right. Well, good night, everybody.
It looks
Thanks, everyone.
dark.
All right.
Bye.
Night.
Thanks, Steph. Appreciate it.